Hey, Lauren, Tech Bros coming to you from rural Maine near the border with New Hampshire. So if I look a little rural, not the neon, but my outlook, that's why. And if I drop out of the stream, that's also why, because of connectivity issues. So anyway, what's up with you?
Is rural Maine? That's where all the Stephen King novels happen, right? Like that's where all the spooky stuff
That's what
happens.
everyone says. Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. I think rural Maine is also redundant. I think Maine is rural. So I should just say I'm in Maine.
I think all of Maine is rural except for like Portland and like Bangor or something.
Yeah, there's
So,
the
like,
coastal place.
yeah, they're pretty well. That's like saying rural anywhere. Like pretty much everywhere is rural. Like you could say rural California. Like most of California is pretty rural.
It's rural agriculture. Yeah, exactly.
Like once you get away from the coast, like I don't know. Like I know people who think Fresno is rural. They think
Yeah.
Fresno, which is large city, is rural. So I think everywhere is rural.
The good news is tech bros are everywhere. So
Do you have a movie theater? Are you going to be able to do the Barbie Oppenheimer thing?
that's what I was just about to talk about. So I want to see Barbie. I will see it soon. I will not see it while I'm in Maine, even though I do assume they have movie theaters here. But I just can't with all the Oppenheimer memes. Like, this is a movie about weapons of mass destruction, and I don't like people joking about it. Like, talk about the movie, even say it's great if you like it. But, like, I just don't think we should be joking about this topic. I don't know if you just saw I just posted that on LinkedIn. So, or maybe you've been publishing Oppenheimer memes and you're part of it.
I'm making any Oppenheimer memes. No, it's interesting because we got that, and then we've got the women's national team. We got the Women's World Cup starting tonight, or started last night, actually, and the U.S. team's playing today. So, like, I always hesitate. Like, I root for the U.S. in competitions, and U.S. is the favorite, and that's very much different than the men's game, where if the U.S. men's team gets out of the first stages, it's good. So we only can underperform or win. So we either have to win it all or it's a failure. And I think that is an interesting place to be in because there's no other like sport like that the U.S. is that dominant in. Even baseball, like there's like the baseball championships and like basketball, like men's and women's, like women's soccer is where we shine through, and we'll see what happens.
Oh, it's incredible.
So
I got to
excited.
interview some of them a couple of years back. I was covering one of the friendlies that they did against China. Obviously, they win everything that they do, and I got to interview was it Hope Solo and Megan Rapinoe and a few of them. And I mean, I'm not like, I could care less about meeting sports stars or celebrities in general, but like talk about impressive people to even like be in the same space with, right? They're pretty awesome. So yeah, I hadn't been following that. So I have a feeling Rachel has though. She knows about soccer. She's our guest. So let's bring her up. Morning, everybody watching. We have a 30-minute show today, which is really short for us. So we're going to have to speed through everything we want to talk to Rachel about. So let's introduce her, Rachel Herrera. She and I work together, full transparency, at Kubit, and she has a long career in customer success. So welcome, Rachel. Do you follow women's soccer?
Unfortunately, I don't. I'm like a Formula One person, so that's like my sport of choice because my dad watched it since I was little, and so like motorsport in general. But no, I'm rooting for them. Hopefully they, like you said, Lauren, either dominate or nothing, like all or nothing kind of season, it sounds like. But I do have my tickets to Oppenheimer for tomorrow.
Okay.
So I'm doing an Oppenheimer Barbie decision there, but I'm like just supremely fascinated with that whole period in time, just like all of the decisions made and the implications of them and the people that made them and complexity of those people. Like, just I'm very looking forward to it. I hear it's a wonderful film.
Yeah, and I'm all for like talk of the film and critique and anything that sheds light.
Certainly no joking matter.
History, but like all the a lot of the memes are the Barbieheimer memes. I'm like, Barbie is a movie that's clearly made to be memeified. Also a very serious cultural critique, from what I've heard. The Barbie movie is.
Yeah, I've heard it's actually got a lot of depth, which is interesting.
Yeah, but like if you're publishing, I don't know, an Oppenheimer meme on LinkedIn, we've got, we're part of an international community of like coworkers and people and data and tech, and I feel like it's a pretty sensitive thing. So anyway, on to the topic of the day, customer success. So let's have you start with the questions, Lauren, because again, you and I come at this from a bit of a different angle. Our interest in why customer success is something that we should be talking about on the Tech Bros show.
Yeah, and well, Rachel, what's if you just want to give our audience like the 1-minute background of what you've been doing in your career in CS and tech, I think that would help set the tone a little bit.
Yeah, because it's been certainly not a straight line. I don't think anybody in CS did that as a straight line. But I originally majored in marketing, believe it or not. I think I watched too much Mad Men when I was in college and thought that would be cool to do. But I really honestly fell in love with data and like sort of the behind the scenes of it all, like deciding how to make money as opposed to actually going out and making it. And I started just as a kind of run-of-the-mill analyst for a number of years. And then I got really bored because it's like doing the same thing over and over again. So then I got into consulting, which I loved because you could do a lot of different things, but still in the world of data. And consulting is where I kind of was face to face with a lot of different use cases, a lot of different businesses that needed help. Mm-hmm. And I got really just like energized by that because I learned a ton every time I met a new company, a new client. What were they facing? What were their challenges? And learning that they're all not so different at the end of the day. And then from there, joined my first startup in 2019, Amplitude, which is in the product analytics space as well, in the professional services organization, which is kind of a part of CS that's a bit more execution oriented, tactical, but still nonetheless important in getting customers to the value within the product. And I just learned a ton from all the different people I was working with because the company was, in comparison, much smaller back then. It was like about 120 people. It wasn't public at the time. So I got to take that ride of a pre-IPO startup trying to carve a place out in the market to growing exponentially to then going public to then going through just a really like kind of growing up period from like toddler to like late teen going into college kind of energy, and worked a ton with a bunch of CS professionals there as well, and really just became just attached and really awed by the amount of stuff that they had to do. And I felt like that would be a really worthwhile challenge to take. So I did a couple of different things at Amplitude, staying in like the go-to-market CS place, but ultimately then decided to make a jump and join Kubit and kind of build their CS function from 0 to hopefully 100 someday. And I learned a ton in seeing all of that happen, taking a lot of that experience with me. And and I've learned, I think, what makes a great CS or in general post-sale person, especially in kind of the unique field of product analytics or just a product that is complex as a Kubit or an Amplitude or anything that lets you kind of manipulate and work with data.
Yeah, no, excellent. Absolutely. It makes total sense. One of my things that I've seen in the last couple of years with data products have been a huge amount of funding behind them the last couple of years, which we all know. Product analytics, the raw infrastructure, different applications, etc. And what that has led to is a trend that I've noticed, which is going online or going on Twitter and just whining, or going on somewhere else and just whining. And like as a CS person, you set things up. You have a relationship with your customer, and you're working at companies that are not open source. Where your customers are signing a contract to go work with you, and part of the deal is you have a dedicated account person, a CS manager. Different companies call them different things, but how do you what have you seen in the last couple of years? Things change. Have you seen what I'm seeing? Is it would you agree? How you've worked changed maybe since 2018, 2019? When you started to where we're at now in 2023?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was when the money was plentiful, hiring was easy, and getting the bodies to cover the amount of customers that a company had was a no-brainer. So I think you got to be a lot closer to the customer as a CSM or just in general post-sales person, because there was the ability to be. You didn't have to be spread thin for the most part. And they started to do a good job of sort of segmenting the customers, and this is just true of any sort of SaaS business, as you've got your top paying, 80-20 rule, right? 80% of the revenues, 20% of the customers, and those 20% likely get a lot more close contact, high touch engagement versus the lower half, which is perfectly fine. You have to scale. You have to figure out how to support customers at every stage. But when you started to feel that hurt and that pain of, hey, we can't hire any more people, hey, the work is becoming to pile up. And as a business, if those SaaS providers didn't invest in those scalable ways to reach and help their customers, I think AI is going to be a huge turning point for CS now that that's becoming a lot more prominent, because ideally you're going to see people be able to find their answer a lot more quickly without having to talk to an individual. But the flip side of that is the requirement is the company had to have invested in really quality and robust help documentation and support documentation and help articles and training videos, and all of those things take time. And if you're not doing that now, you're probably late. So like the first thing I did when I joined Kubit was like decide, how are we going to scale up in the future without maybe like doing it too quickly, of course, but realizing that that would inevitably come, and a product as complex as this one demands it and requires it if you want to get the adoption and the user base that you expect, because a single person can't reach 500 users in a day. So all they can do is go to Twitter or go to LinkedIn and talk about how painful it is, because they probably haven't been given another avenue to do it more constructively.
Sure.
As someone on the CS side who's seen those, I don't know, critiques on, whether it's LinkedIn or Twitter, whatever, what's your kind of, is some of that potentially helpful over the years, or do you feel like that's just, I think the expression you've used in some of our chats for sort of related things is just kind of poking the eyeball, and, it's not necessarily, there are other ways of moving things along than calling things out publicly in that way, or does that contribute to the discussion and pointing out pain points? And
I think it does. I mean, it can be so easy, and really it's not a hard shift to make as a CS person, because you get so hyper focused on maybe a specific initiative you're doing internally, and having the constant awareness and like wide aperture of things you have to care about can become really daunting over time. And so oftentimes those like mean rants on Twitter or like the call outs are the wake up call that folks need to realize like, hey, this is a problem. But I also think it goes back to how well is the business investing in the ability to surface those more quickly, because likely that's not the first time that person has raised the issue or asked the question. And so just as we tell our customers to use data to make decisions in their product or their user experience, the same can be said for CS professionals. You should be using data to surface those often asked questions, and you should be hopefully given tools to do that more effectively. It's when those things don't happen that the burden then falls on that CS person to have all that information in their head and put it in a spreadsheet that you hope somebody knows exists so they can go check it. And it's just that painful growing that I'm hoping a lot of the new technology out lately is going to shorten that pain for any new teams or CS people that are being asked to solve really hard problems for their customers or manage a high volume intake of questions, concerns, bugs, etc. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I find them to be kind of fun, honestly, because I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah. So in rolling out your product, your solution with customers, there's a bunch of different frameworks that I've used and seen and been a part of on both sides in my career. Like one's like 30, 60, 90 day, like, by day 30, here's what you should have done this, and this. And by day 60, you should have done this widget and that feature and implemented that, like how are you managing to that? Is that still like
a framework or
a thing, like that kind of framework? Are there new, the 30, 60, 90 was always the framework that like
Yeah.
I've seen for a while. Like, is that still the dominant like type of framework? Like, what are the trends in tech CS that maybe our user or our viewers don't know about?
Yeah, so 30, 60, 90 is very much still there, also commonly referred to as the crawl, walk, run. But I think that to me is more about, it's important, but it should only be important when you're talking about implementation and getting a customer up and running. It should not be the only yardstick or measure stick that you use to measure the success of the customer health or the CS individual. Because within the first 90 days, if depending on how complicated your product is to get up and running, it should be, because you have reached one full quarter. And if you go to your leadership and say, hey, we bought this thing a quarter ago and it's still not turned on, I think we're getting very far away from that being an acceptable answer, just as far as how much technology will move forward and how hopefully easy it is to do the things that we want to do when we buy those SaaS products. The one I'm more interested in, and it seems the one that's more prevalent, is understanding the customer lifecycle or customer journey, because ultimately in post-sales, you want to implement, adopt, grow, and then either expand or renew. And then you want them to become like a
cult member,
evangelist or promoter, right? You want them to love your product so much that they go tell others they should go buy it. And then the cycle continues, because then they renew and you want to expand, grow, adopt, et cetera, et cetera. And that can happen over an infinite number of days, weeks, months, depending on a lot of different factors. So it becomes less of a strict framework in terms of days or milestones, and more about a playbook to understand where are they at in that journey and what are the methods. How do you want to get them to value quickly so they can move on to the next phase or next stage? I have issue though bringing that to a customer, because it seems a bit self-serving. That those things matter to me. They don't really matter to you, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, right? Because you, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, don't care if you grow or renew. You just want to get value out of the product. So there's got to be a way that you then message what's in it for me back to that customer in a way that helps you both accomplish and achieve the goals that you're set out to accomplish.
Across your career, what's being in CS, is it harder to deal with things internally or with your customers?
Oh, that's a spicy question. I think
without calling anyone out.
No, I mean, just in my long experience working with customers, I think they give you a lot of grace, and they usually come with the best intentions. And so it's hard for me to say that working with them is a challenge. It can just be challenging because of environments that maybe they're stuck in or they're forced to work within. Internally, though, I think the worst thing, and I've seen this firsthand, is when a CS person feels like they're getting power or influence taken away, because ultimately that CS person should be that direct line of customer needs this to get value out of our product team, you should build it, and here's why. Like, that was the ultimate, I think, value of having a CS function, outside of keeping a customer happy, making sure they renew, making sure they know the product. They should also be facilitating that feedback loop. And I think the moment you take them out of that feedback loop, it becomes really hard to have them feel like they can make any change or impact, because then they're just suddenly stuck in front of a really upset or an angry customer saying, I'll raise a ticket and that's all I can do. You know, like, you want them to be an advocate internally. And internally, when that doesn't happen, I think you can start to feel a lot of the frustration and a lot of the fire go out of a CS person.
And that kind of gets at whether you're in a very, very small company or very large, you know, regardless of the official hierarchies, there are hierarchies in terms of, you know, what's really, which stakeholders are valued. And my impression, again, of customer success is that it, you know, in general might not be given sort of the same prestige as engineering, or, you know, I wouldn't say marketing has prestige, but marketing knows how to advocate for itself, right? So have you seen that customer success teams tend to be sort of disempowered, or am I making that up?
I mean, I think they're the easiest to point a finger at, to be honest, because they're the first line of defense. So it's a tough gig, because they are just trying their best most of the time, and they're fighting an uphill battle with some customers, and They can't get people on the phone, and outside eyes may see, what are you doing? You know, what are you doing all day? Like, this customer is still red and they've been red for 3 months. And so they have to do a lot of like justification, saying, no, these are the things I'm doing, which is why going to like a playbook model or something that you can all speak a similar language. I've tried 5 of the 10 things you've told me to do, and none of them have been successful. I need help. Versus constantly feeling you're just getting a bunch of feedback that is unhelpful and sort of out of context. So yeah, I don't necessarily think it's a matter of like, it's a common thing, but I certainly think it's a easier thing, if that's not too bold to say.
Should here's a question I have, right? Like, so I find that the CS role often gets muddled with like 2 other types of roles. And one is, I would call it like, if there's a lot of, on the customer side, a lot of implementation needed, and it's a very technical product, like a lot of these companies will have like what's called like a developer advocate or developer experience person or something like that. And Mary and I did a show on developer advocacy earlier in the year, which also, like, sometimes that's just marketing. Who knows? It's different. Who knows? It could be anything. And so there's that role. And then there's also like, you know, a sales role, which is like some companies will have a CS person, and that's the customer's, you know, week to week, month to month type of person. They're running quarterly business reviews. They're the, you know, person who, you know, is the go-to with the customer. But when it's time to renew, then, oh, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Sales guy that we haven't spoken to in a year comes back. Or, you know, what do you think like works in all that, and what doesn't work? And like, how do you think about all that? And I ask this mostly, not necessarily at your current job, but you've worked at a few places now, and I'm sure you've done with the politics and seen this and see what works, what doesn't. Like, what do you think about like that whole space of, you know, the people who the customer sees after the contract signs? You know, who's behind door number 1, 2, and 3? And are we talking to a salesperson? Are we talking to a developer advocate? Like, how does that all play out in your head?
Yeah, no, I think it's a fair question, because I don't know if the right mix has been figured out yet, because I think it really depends on the product and the circumstances, right? Because I can just speak from, you know, my experience, obviously, but like, if your product is incredibly technically driven, there's a lot of elements and coordination required across teams, and the data becomes like sort of the underlying thing that needs to always be right. Then I think having a more technical kind of specialized role in CS is necessary. Maybe it's a solution architect, maybe it's like a customer architect, or however we want to call it, developer advocate, I guess. But like, that person is going to help de-risk, and it's going to ideally help shorten the pain between, I have a problem, I found a solution. Because now you're not asking that CS person to then quarterback 50 meetings across multiple people at the company who have part of the answer. And so finding those unicorn people that can be technical, but also customer facing, but also consultative, is hard, but it's worth the investment, because you're going to have to pay them a lot of money, because they're expensive and because they're very good at their job, ideally. But you don't have to have one for every customer, because that becomes like an added bonus benefit role that you can either pay for time like a consultant, or you can buy it into your contract. And so I think that is honestly the way to go, because some customers just don't need it. They get it. They don't want to pay for it. They don't have to pay for it. But the ones that, you know, and when you see them coming a mile away, you're like, the sales process, I'm like, if these people close, this is going to be the worst, most painful implementation we've ever seen. And so you just know after a while, and you just know that in the best interest of both sides, we need to add this person, and we need to make it required, because we're going to need it anyway, and we don't want to give it away for free, and we want to make sure we're setting the right expectations. But as far as like the CS person goes, I think they should be as flexible and comfortable in the product as they expect the customer to be, because I think they should be the example the customer wants to emulate. I don't think they should manage sales process cycles, renewals. I don't think they should talk about any of that, because that's not tied to value to the customer. The customer success person should always care, did my interaction with this individual or this team provide them value? Very rarely does a sales conversation provide value to the customer. It more often is back to the company. And so letting the salesperson thrive in the environment they're asked to thrive in, which is negotiating, talking about sales price, et cetera. I think that's a perfectly fine and comfortable relationship to have, because it doesn't blur the line between I'm talking to the CS person about money versus I'm talking to the CS person about value.
I want to just bring in a couple of quick comments from viewers. Val Galdine says, a good CS contact can make a huge difference in product adoption. We ditched a few companies because they failed in addressing our issues repeatedly. Chris Brousseau says, employing people to help customers figure out your product helps your product succeed. Indeed. And Chris Tab says, business value focused approach that can be evidence that unlock incremental leveling up of capabilities that support other business value channels. That's a lot of words, Chris, but I know what you're saying.
Chris is just going to throw the word business value in there as much as possible. Yes, Chris is the business value guy these days. Well, I mean, we got a short show today, and we got a few minutes here, but I would love to ask, like, Rachel, like, you said you started out as an analyst, then you were doing like pro serve and implementation stuff with an analytics company. Like, for someone who might be an engineer or some technical product manager or an analyst or someone, how could they get into CS? Like, maybe in their own organizations or maybe at a new job? Like, how can they transition into that role? And what did you learn when you made that move?
Yeah, I mean, being customer facing in any capacity is going to help you transition, because if you've always been behind the scenes and you haven't interacted a lot with customers, that's the biggest change and shift you have to make, because it just is just a different way of speaking. It's a different way of assessing and reading somebody's body language, where they're at in their cycle. Like, are they new? Are they experienced? Have they seen something like this before or not, et cetera? And so I think if you are in a role that's not customer facing and you want to move, maybe volunteer to do lots of customer interviews or sign up for a project that gets you in front of customers more often and see if you like it. Because some people don't. Some people are like, nope, I'm comfortable behind my computer screen. I don't really want to engage with the general public. So, thanks, but no thanks. And then usually the way that customers or companies will hire up into CS is you can either start in a support role, which is sort of the easiest, fastest way to get into the customer-facing post-sales organization without having a ton of experience. You just need to be able to answer support questions, learn the product, of course. And if it's a technical product, being technical, I think, is going to help you a lot. So if you understand those systems and how they work, that's going to be to your benefit. Also, there's CS roles that are in more of the mid-market or corporate space. So lower paying customers, they're entry-level positions that you could join. But I honestly think support is sort of like the crucible in which good CS people are forged, because you just have a ton of stuff coming at you. You've got to be really quick, nimble in the product. You've got to know all the different permutations of how somebody can answer and ask a question. And if you do that for a year and you enjoy it and you're good at it, going into CS should be a really easy transition.
Tell us where people can find you, because that was a great start. And I kind of wanted, if we had more time, I would have fleshed out more. So how people can take this path, because it's one of those, again, not so highlighted roles within tech that can lead to amazing, high earning, intellectually satisfying careers, and ones that also can shift into major leadership roles as you go.
So I did a year in sales, and that was probably the most educational time period, honestly, as well as I was selling professional services. So I had to fight against the solution mindedness of myself and sell it. And then I built a ton of empathy for sales individuals. So I think, whatever, if you're interested in it, that's my most favorite thing about tech is you can usually, if you know somebody that's on that team, jump into it, try it out, see if you like it, see if you don't. So
you can find you on LinkedIn, or
I don't do the Twitters. I don't know how. I'm like a terrible millennial. But LinkedIn is probably the best place to reach me, and it's just Rachel Herrera. I'm usually the top one. We'll see. I don't know.
All right. Well, we'll bring you back next time to get your hot takes on all of this, which we didn't get to. But thank you. This was awesome. Full of, as Chris would say, business value.
That's the name of the game.
All right.
Value.
Enjoy the movies over the weekend, whoever gets to one. Talk soon.
Cool.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye.